What's up, everybody? Craig here from the Prehab guys team. I just got done recording this podcast with Cesar. So Cesar is the head athletic trainer for the MLS LA Galaxy soccer team. This was probably one of my favorite podcasts by far because for anyone that doesn't know, I am a huge soccer fan. I grew up playing soccer my entire life. I played as young as maybe 4 or 5 years old. I tried a ton of different sports, but soccer is what really rang and rhymes with me. And I played it all year round. And ultimately, that's how I got exposure to physical therapy, because when I was playing in high school, what I like to self-diagnose myself with is I had a partial quad tear, my proximal quad tendon tear, after I just wasn't ready. Simply put, it was the start of like junior year of high school, and that summer I slacked off. I didn't do any training to be prepared for preseason, and I just remember I went for a sprint. Something didn't feel right in my knee, and then we were jumping in the shooting. I tried ripping the ball, and it did not feel good, and my quad, my knee swelled up big time. I've never seen anything like it. And I ended up in a physical therapy clinic where my mom went for physical therapy, actually. The physical therapy experience that I had was not one that I would give today. However, I got a ton of exposure to what physical therapy was, and I just learned what the field was. And for me, it was incorporating science and human movement, and I love that. So this podcast is going to cover everything in regards to soccer and football for some of you out there. I named it football for a reason, because I think we need to keep those roots and continue to call it football. But Cesar's the man. This podcast was awesome. So I've done a few interviews with a few physical therapists and athletic trainers at the collegiate and professional level, amongst different sports, whether it be American football, whether it be baseball, college football. It's always interesting because you're getting different inputs, you're getting different feedback. It's always unique, and Cesar brought up some really good stuff today. Cesar is awesome because he comes from such an interesting dynamic. You're going to learn about it, but he works in the MLS, and then he has two brothers. I thought he only had one, but he actually has two brothers that they actually play soccer in the MLS league. So it's really cool to hear about that interesting dynamic. And then probably my favorite part about this podcast was diving into talking about just like the current landscape of what the pandemic, COVID-19, is forcing on the sports world. And it was really cool to hear just live, right? It's like things are changing by the day, and Cesar was awesome because he gave us an inside look as to how the organization is handling it, how he is personally handling it, and then how all the players are handling it. And more importantly, we get an inside look as to what players are doing and how organizations are keeping tabs on their players. Because I think when sports return, it's going to be really, really interesting, right? From a sports medicine standpoint and from an injury standpoint, are we going to see a lot more injuries? Are skills not going to be sharp? Are people going to be rusty? Is the speed of play going to be different? There's a lot of unknowns, but it could go either way, right? Like maybe people are going to be super refreshed. Who knows? We can make all the predictions in the world, but Cesar brought up some really, really interesting points that I'm excited for you to listen to, and it's a lot of food for thought. It's really going to make you think. And then more importantly, we dive into just sort of the methodology and the resources that pro sports teams have, but more importantly, like, what do you do with those things and how do they help you make informed decisions? I enjoy asking that question every single time when I get to talk to someone that works for a professional sports organization, because they answer it a little bit differently, but I would say Cesar answered it in one of the best ways compared to anyone else, because he brought everything back and I mentioned that. So if you like soccer, this podcast is for you. Cesar touches on a ton of really cool things. You get an inside look to managing pro soccer players and what it's like being an athletic trainer. So hope you enjoy this one. Stick around. The audio does get a little bit choppy at one point. What we did was I had to text Cesar actually and be like, hey, your audio is getting a little bit choppy. Let's turn off our videos. And once we turned off the videos, then it was pretty smooth sailing. So I apologize for some of the choppiness, but I promise you didn't miss anything too crazy. Stick around, get through it, because what Cesar covers later that didn't get interrupted it's very, very valuable, and it's definitely worth your time. So hope you enjoy this one.
The Prehab audio experience will teach you how to take control of your health through knowledge by optimizing performance, promoting longevity, and keeping your movement system in tune. Welcome to your host, the Prehab guys.
Today, we have Cesar Roldan Jr., the head athletic trainer for the LA Galaxy soccer team. Cesar is a SoCal native and comes from a family with deep roots in soccer. Cesar is also responsible for overseeing day-to-day operations in the training room, acute management of sport-related injuries, and communicating with sports science and performance staff on managing players throughout the season. Cesar, it's an honor to have you join the show. Thank you.
Thank you for having me, my friend.
Yeah, we've been trying to get this one going for a long, long time. And I think the inside joke is I was supposed to come to a LA Galaxy game. Cesar hooked me up with some tickets, but I wasn't able to make it. So I stood up Cesar a little bit, and it was a hard time getting him on.
Yeah, it's all right. I'm charging you now for the for that. So you'll get a bill invoice out to, Prehab guys. So as long as you're good with that, we're good to carry on with this.
Cool. I'm going to pass that one on to Rosh and Mike to handle.
Perfect.
All right. So just an update with everyone currently right now. It is April 9th, 2020. And things are kind of crazy right now. We're sort of in the middle of a pandemic, COVID-19. So for the first time in our lifetime ever, sports are just on a hold. You go to ESPN and there's nothing there. There are no live sports. So Cesar, walk us through sort of where you guys are right now, because right now would be maybe like the first quarter of the season. Yeah.
That's correct. Yeah, this is quite a busy time for us right now. It's busy in the sense that we've put in a lot of work during the preseason to get the boys ready to go. The guys have been, working really, really hard and have that mindset that this is a 10-month season. So we gotta set the standard high really early on. So to have this pause, basically 3 games into the season's unprecedented, and we're not used to this kind of stuff. I think this might be the first birthday that I actually won't be on the road or at a practice or at a game for in probably something around 7 or 8 years, which is kind of weird because I'm just used to always having to be on the grind, and the boys, their identity, falls a lot on them being athletes and playing, and everything is centered around that. So I think a lot of guys are having probably a little bit difficult time, and I'm talking about athletes as a whole in general, not just my boys, but I think as a whole they're probably dealing with some of those issues on I don't know what to do. I'm at home. I'm supposed to be, kicking balls in the morning and then going home and resting and eating correctly, doing maybe a yoga session or something like that. So yeah, these are difficult times, and I think we're all kind of trying to adjust and hopefully take advantage of this time to, connect family and better ourselves in some avenues that we want to, look into, or, I don't know. It's just about, I think right now, grasping this moment and really looking into ourselves a bit, and then also supporting the people around us, to try to get through this all together, because it'll end at some point. We just don't know when that's going to come.
Yeah, I keep writing that down in my journal that this too shall pass, because this is crazy. And I couldn't agree with you more. You hit on such a good point. And I feel like it's especially true with soccer players that like it is just part of their identity when they go to introduce themselves. People that are passionate about soccer and they play soccer and soccer revolves around their life, they don't say that they play soccer. They say that they are a soccer player. It goes in tune with exactly who they are and their identity. And for both of us being in the rehab field, it's when a player gets hurt, that is a big stab at their identity because now they're not able to do the things that they love to do. So for players to be in the situation now where they're not able to play soccer, but it's not because of an injury, it's because of something so much bigger and greater than themselves. It's really hard to, wrap your head around it. I'm curious, like, how are you guys, how is the sports medicine staff and how are the players sort of handling it?
Well, on our side, we had a couple meetings on the early side of things where so we were supposed to travel to Miami to go play an away game, and the morning of that travel day, typically we train in the morning. After training, we'll get food at the stadium, shower, change, and then go to the airport and take off together as a team, right? So we showed up that morning, and before most of the players had even showed up, we had a message from the league saying that all activities were canceled. So basically that day we still trained. We were allowed to train, and we as a staff put together a meeting and put together some programs that we were going to unroll and give to the players if we were to not show up to the stadium anymore. And that's exactly what happened. They didn't allow us to continue coming to the stadium as a huge group with all the protocols that the cities, the counties were putting out and unrolling. The league had a few things that they put out and unrolled. So we put together a plan to try to stay on top of these guys by having meeting calls, having Zooms with the players, and then also putting together injury prevention protocols for the guys, and the performance and sports science staff put together some running workouts and home gym workouts to do during that time. So the way we're looking at it is if we can give them some things to do to obviously keep them occupied and keep them fit, and then track them using like a polar heart strap, and then send those reports onto us, we can have a better idea of what the boys are doing at home, and then keep the social aspect by just checking in on them and seeing how them and their families are doing. Because as you know, with any team setting, these people become your family, and you spend more time with them than you do your own family. You're on the road, you're in the training room, you're in the locker room every day, almost every day. So they become your extended family, and sometimes those guys are here without their family, so they rely on us heavily as well. So I think us as a staff have really taken that on our shoulders and said, like, we need to stay on top of these guys, not just because these are pro athletes that are getting played by our company and this and that. These are people that we've grown very closely to, and we want to make sure that them and their families are doing well. And if they need anything, they know who to reach out to in confidence. So that's some of the things that we've tried to do early on, so that our guys don't feel like they've just been thrown by the wayside, which I'm sure many people, not again, talking, we have to separate sometimes the athletes from the general pop and all that.
Totally.
Right now, they are general pop. Right now, they're
Yeah.
general population, and them as well as any other person in general population is probably feeling, for lack of, no pun intended or anything, but they're all feeling isolated.
Big time.
Why? Because they're not going into having those one-on-one conversations at work. They're not being exposed to or being challenged by others, in the workplace or in even like bars and all that stuff. So I think it's I think that's one way to stay on top of these guys, is let them know that they can reach out in confidence whenever they need it, if it's just a talk or if it's something more serious where they're worried that they might have symptoms of, this crisis right now. So
Yeah.
that's kind of how we've aimed to go about things.
I love that you guys are using wearables. I think that's awesome because now you're getting data on these guys, and more importantly, that's gonna help with accountability, especially if you're able to sort of house all that data in the same spot. Everyone's able to view it and see it, because then, yeah, it will challenge other players, and let's see how everyone is holding up. And what's nice is in pro sports, I'm sure that you guys do a ton of baseline testing, so it's going to be really, really interesting down the road, sort of when this quarantine ends and sports resume, because how sharp are players going to be? What are injury rates going to be? What is the speed of play going to be? So there's going to be it's going to be like starting the season over again, but I don't think athletes are going to be as prepared as they were. I don't know. We'll see. What do you think?
I think you hit it pretty spot on, and your worries are the same as mine.
Yeah.
But that's why we I think that's why we put out the heart rate straps and
Hmm.
have them send us their workouts, because we need to know what they're looking like and what they're doing during this time. Because if they
Yeah.
don't, then they're going to be in my hands again, because now they have an injury, and then we're going to have to worry about that versus going and saying, hey, well, we saw your workout progressions throughout this whole interlude, and you know what, you're actually doing pretty well. We need to top you off on maybe some high speed running or some sprinting that you haven't done too much of, and get you better prepared for a training session in that way versus kind of guessing. Either way, there is going to need to be a quote unquote preseason that we
Yeah.
do anyway leading into games. And I'm pretty sure that's going to be somewhat mandated by the league in certain respects,
That'll be
and
good.
honored by the teams to get the boys ready. Because like you said, if we just show up next week, let's say, I doubt it,
Hmm.
highly doubted,
Yeah.
but let's say next week we show up for a Friday training session,
Uh-huh.
and let's just throw that day out there, and then we're expected to play a week later. There's not going to be the quality that we need. There's not going to be the aerobic baseline that we need.
Yeah.
There's not going to be those baseline measurements that you're talking about that we might have done in preseason. Those might not be matched, but those are also things that we can utilize to see where they were maybe 2-3 months ago when we first tested them, and see how they show up in the next month, let's say.
Yeah.
We can use those numbers to actually have a secondary baseline, and then go from there to prescribe prevention, preventional injury workouts, or actual strength protocols, or anything like that. We can actually base the programs that we're going to do off of that information that we've taken when they show up again, which again we don't know, and how they did show up day one in January. So very important information that we have stored and tracked.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's just because it's what you guys did over the past 3 months. You're just going to be going through that process all over again. But it's good, right? I mean, that's how you make better informed decisions using data like that. I think the challenging aspects for every single athlete and every single team is restarting that mindset. And for some guys that have been in the league for a while, I mean, it's yeah, like I look at it as it's throwing off athletes like playing circadian rhythms, right? It's like
Mm,
they feel like they should be in season right now, hitting everything in stride, but now they need to somehow, take a step back, return the wheel, get back in gear. It'll be really interesting.
yeah, another consideration is the fact that, let's say the German league, which is actually, I believe, set to start training in small groups pretty soon.
Hmm.
So the German league, country's not that big, but the US as a whole is massive. And we
Yeah.
have markets in New York, as well as Seattle, as well as Houston, as well as Miami. So there are different environments that, even training environments. Let's say an athlete that lives in New York City, they can't necessarily leave their high-rise,
Yeah.
apartment complex to go run on the street. And if they did that, one, they're could be exposed to this issue now that we're dealing with COVID. That's one. Two, they're going to be running on cement,
Yeah.
and they're probably going to give them a big aerobic, run to do every so often. That's going to bring on some complications with, as you know, like runner's knee and other issues, other overuse issues that are going to come out from the ground reaction forces of cement versus grass that they're used to playing on.
Yep.
And versus another club that may be in Columbus that does not have as many cases and has a lot more open areas that they can go and run a couple hills, with grass. And so there's just going to be a lot of other considerations that we haven't even thought of just yet that are going to reveal themselves in a month or two when we start coming back and saying, wow, this team actually looks a bit more prepared. Is that because the staff prepared them correctly? Is that because the individual players took it upon themselves to maintain themselves during the time? Or is it the actual environment that they were in, where they had a ton of cases like in Seattle or in New York, where they were literally shut down the city was really shut down for a prolonged period of time versus other places that were not,
Yeah.
So it'll be interesting. Yeah.
Very interesting. What we can say is at least all the boys in LA, they're running outside with some nice, crisp, clean air. So the LA boys should be looking good. With you mentioned Seattle, and I sort of want to transition to this because you have a really interesting story, and I think you have a really, really cool family dynamic. And I totally have just stalked your Instagram story, especially during the playoffs last year, because it was pretty cool. But you have a brother that plays for Seattle, correct?
I actually have two brothers that play for Seattle.
Two brothers.
So so I have my middle brother. So
Okay.
I'm 28.
Uh-huh.
Christian, the middle brother, he is 24, about to be turned 25, and then Alex is 23. So Alex, Christian, and then myself. So Alex got drafted by Seattle. I don't want to butcher this. I think it was 3 years ago.
Okay.
I believe this is his third season, and then Christian's, I believe, this is his sixth season with Seattle. So yeah, both the little brothers are on a professional soccer team, and they've both done very well. I mean, they won the cup last year.
Yeah, they won the cup.
It's not too bad.
Wow, I didn't know that there's two of them on the team. I knew that there was
you
one.
You didn't stock well enough.
Yeah, not enough. Man, I gotta amp up my my investigating. But yeah, so it's like that's what I mean. The family is just so deep rooted in soccer. I can just only imagine like the family dynamics and how proud your parents must be. I mean, that's what an awesome story that is. So very, very cool. Tell us more.
I mean,
go ahead.
No, I was just saying, I mean, I do want to give a little shout out to my parents because they are the reason why all three of us are where we're at. Mom and dad came here, in the 80s from Central America, and they made a name for themselves in their own right in doing work and making the American dream happen for themselves. And then that led to three boys that kind of followed their dream and wanted to stay in soccer in some capacity. I'm not playing. I can't say that I can play, but but I wanted to be around it at least. Yeah. So that's why I made it this way. But Christian's done really well as in his own right as well. He's not just played for the Sounders, but he's also played for the U.S. national team, and that's one of the hopes that he continues on this path and makes his way into more starting lineups for the national team, and hopefully find himself in the next World Cup if he's lucky, and if he plays his cards right, and just keeps living the life that he does. But Alex is not too far behind him. So yeah, my parents aren't the only proud ones. I'm also very, very proud of my brothers. except for when we play against them. There's definitely I want them to score goals, but we just need to have at least one goal more before we leave. So
That's right. That's great. Well, they got a great trainer that can be there on their waiting hand, helping them out, leading them to a cup. So, yeah,
yeah,
tell us, how did you end up as the head athletic trainer for the LA Galaxy? Why aren't you on the field playing with them?
yeah, right. I mean, I guess that one goes back to exposure and high school days. You know, our school. So I'm from Southern California, Pico Rivera specifically. So it's like outside of East LA. Uh, our school didn't get too much exposure
Hmm.
when we were going to school, and also I didn't know how to get recruited. My parents didn't know what they had to do to have a college, look at me or that kind of stuff. So what I did know was I liked sports and I also liked medicine. So obviously put those two together and here I am. But
Yeah.
I didn't know what sports medicine really was. Like, we didn't really have a true athletic trainer at our high school. There was a PE teacher that, for the lack of regulation that California has for athletic trainers, they were able to just pay him an extra stipend, and he was our trainer. So when I went to college, I said I wanted to do something along those lines, but I didn't really know what athletic training was. So I looked around it, I found out what it was, and went to Cal State Long Beach. So I didn't get any D1 scholarships. That's all to say that I didn't get that D1 scholarship. I had a couple offers for D2, D3, but I would be doing schooling that wasn't interesting to me. I wanted to be in
Hmm.
sports medicine.
Yeah.
So I went to Long Beach State, and I did my undergrad there. Um, Meanwhile, my brothers were doing really well at our old high school, and they won a couple regional championships and the state championship during their time. And that's when the exposure started to come around. And Christian actually was the Gatorade National Player of the Year
Wow.
his senior year. So that's when people came knocking at the door, and he got his scholarship to University of Washington. And then the year after that, Alex got his scholarship to Seattle University. So they both went up there. I went to school in Seattle as well. Meanwhile, I was here in Los Angeles working with, after I graduated from Long Beach, went to Orange County Soccer Club, which was, or I'm sorry, Orange County Blues, or now the Orange County Soccer Club. So it was a minor league team, and started my master's program online through Rocky Mountain University of Health. Think not offended. I wouldn't want to say that way, but I would definitely state what I thought. The things I thought very strongly about was I wanted to be in soccer, so I need to tailor most of what I do to being in a professional soccer environment.
Hmm.
So that's kind of college. I would lean towards the lower extremity sports, and specifically I would lean towards soccer. So so that's kind of how it started. It was there was an idea of what I wanted to do in high school, not really knowing what that was, but having a small idea, and then tailoring everything. Once I found that program, tailoring everything to be the head athletic trainer for the, because everything I did was literally to be in the position that I'm in right now.
Hmm.
The internships that I did, the jobs that I took, the people that I was meeting with, the mentors that I sought for, and the people that I thought could help mold me into being someone at this level. So yeah, I mean, straight out of college, it was to a pro, and then there was to another internship, another pro team, and then ended up here 3 years ago. So
Nice.
in the quick and dirty, that's that's kind of it there.
Yeah, and it's any great story like that, it just comes down to you have to immerse yourself around what you want to be in. And it's taking those jobs, it's taking those internships, it's taking those positions where you're gonna grind, you're gonna work a lot, you're gonna put in a lot of time and effort, but it'll pay off. When the opportunity presents, I always think it's whoever is most ready for that opportunity, they're always going to capitalize on it. So with that being said, what's it like being an athletic trainer in pro soccer? How would you compare it to some of your previous experiences?
Well, previous experiences, I think I would really look at just the different personalities that you have in different sports. So I think in like American football, there's just a very hard nose, like everything is at a all-time like maximal. All right, we need to go into the gym and we're gonna bench press and squat and do these things like very strongly. We're working on strength a lot of the time. We're working on power a lot of the time, and it's just like this grit. Like you walk into one of those weight rooms, it's, I don't know, it reminds me of like a 1970s, like you go into one of those like dungeons and that's the mentality you gotta have. There's like heavy metal. But with like I'm just trying to paint a picture here, right?
Of course.
I'm trying to paint a picture here. But so I think for soccer, it's there's a lot less of that, and it's more, you have to pick and choose your battles in a lot of ways when you're trying to get some of these guys to work and to get the best out of them. And I know this because there's, I don't know, it's just this, it's the mentality a lot. It's brought on by players that come from Europe, players that come from all these different environments and have their own upbringing. And then you have the American-based players here. Sorry, I'm going to stop really quick. Is the internet, is it kind of coming out kind of wonky?
A little bit. Right now we're good, but a little choppy here and there. But we'll see what the finished product is. But you're good for now. I will cut you off if I'm losing you.
Sounds good. Yeah, I was looking at this thing kind of bouncing around the screen as I was saying it, so I got kind of stuck. Yeah, sorry about that. But going back, it's just really managing a lot of the personalities that come into the training room, because there's so many different perceptions, as to how things should be done. I think that's the most challenge probably, is taking a guy that came from England and is used to that kind of hard-nosed mentality, and then having other players that come from other places. I'm not going to name countries or regions, but they're just not as strong mentally, soccer players, but they're just not trained as well in the gym or anything like that. So it's so that could be a challenge. So that's the biggest thing, I think, is trying to work with those personalities, because the rest is known. If you played soccer and you know those if you know the nuances of playing the sport, then it's actually really easy and fun for me. It was actually more difficult for me to go into the basketball, teams, and go into the football teams, because that mentality I wasn't so used to. So for me, this is I'm not going to say easy, because it's not. It's a challenge every single day, but it's familiar, and I enjoy that. I enjoy it being familiar, and I also know that I can talk to these guys in their terms, because I'm very familiar with the sport, versus talking to a basketball player. I might know their body, but I don't know their sport as much.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more.
Long-winded answer there, but
no, it's good, because we're sort of going back and forth right now. We're sorting out the audio, and Cesar and I, what we did was we just cut off our video, so we're hoping that nothing gets cut out. But no, I couldn't agree with you more. I grew up playing soccer my entire life. That's why I was really excited to make this podcast happen, and I feel the same way. I have navigated and sort of niched down to trying to see as many soccer players as I can. I love when a soccer player comes into the clinic, because I'm just able to talk their lingo. I'm able to relate to them. And I understand that sport so much more than versus, okay, baseball or tennis. I just try to stick to my strengths at this point. Of course, I feel comfortable with helping any athlete, anyone that moves, and helping a human move well. But when it comes to soccer, it's like, all right, dude, now you're talking my language. So it's interesting though. I've spoken to people that work in pro sports in the past, and it's funny how some people will bring up that there's different personalities based on position. But with soccer being such a internationally wide accepted sport, the most popular sport in the world, you're going to run into these different personalities with people from different backgrounds and different areas. So it's really interesting. Of course, I'm sure you get this all the time because you're working with one of the most well-known soccer players around the world, maybe one of the most controversial. How was Zlatan? We have to, whatever you're willing to share, we have to hear about it.
Yeah, it was that was an experience and a half. Yeah, that was an experience and a half. It was crazy because the way that that it started was he comes I believe it's on a Wednesday, and we had a game on Saturday, or if it was it might have been Wednesday night and a game on Saturday. So he had been around for just like basically 2 days, and then was asked to jump into probably the biggest game of our year. It was early on in the year. It was a March 30th or March 31st 2 years ago, but it was a very early game in that season. But it was by far like probably the biggest game of that year.
Yeah.
Looking back on it, it was against LAFC. It was the first game ever against LAFC. He was on the bench. He hadn't played a full 90-minute match in I think it was something like 15 months because of that devastating knee injury he had while he was at Manchester United. But he comes on with about 20 minutes left, and the rest is history. The guy scores. We're 3 goals down, and the guy scores 2 on his own, helps the team get another, and we win that game 4-3 with really no odds of even tying that game. So he cemented himself as one of the greats in MLS on that day. I mean,
Yeah.
we basically knew that he was going to be one of the greats, but he kind of cemented it just in 6 minutes. So yeah, he was he's a monster. He's just a genetic beast, this guy. Watching him do the Nordboard is incredible. And those numbers don't lie. So I mean, it was crazy, but he did have a personality that was difficult for some people to try to manage. And he's a very wealthy, well-known soccer player, known the world over, and he demands a lot. He wants to win, and when he feels like people are not meeting him where he needs to be met, or if anything is done substandard, he'll let you know about it. So all to say that I had a pretty good relationship with him. I think because it goes back to that personality trait is you got to be able to like banter with these guys and stand your ground. And when you tell someone to do something, you've done it with reason, and you've done it with research, and then you've done it with not backing down and being afraid, because it's like a dog. These guys smell fear. So I think that's why I enjoy also working with. Yeah, I think that's a part that I missed. That's one of the reasons why I enjoy working with soccer players, is because again, I can meet them on their own field, and it really helps that I have 2 brothers who they're going to be playing against that are in the same league, and the fact that I have a pretty love-hate personality, I think. So some people love it, some people hate it, but I think I get a lot of buy-in by the players coming from that mindset, So maybe it's something for me to work on the psychological piece, but again, being in that environment, it's different than being at a high school. So
Big time.
you can't talk to your players at a high school the same way you can talk to pro athletes who have a good head on their shoulders, you know? So yeah, but that guy was something else, man. It was an honor, and also one of those things where, like, okay, like, I'm walking on eggshells here, but let's keep the big lad happy and scoring goals. And that's what we did for most that year. So
it's amazing. Yeah, you're walking a fine line because you're trying to stick to your guns. These guys understand that you're only trying to help them. You're there for them, support. There's a camaraderie to it, but you also can't get walked all over. So, of course, you're going to butt heads with people, but I think when it comes to pro sports, you're just like, hey, this is how we're going to do it. We're going to try to help you out, and it's never going to be all roses and rainbows, but ultimately it's about winning. So I think when the results come in and when things are rolling well, that stuff is okay. So the next thing that I want to talk about is what are probably the most common things that you see, as well as what are the most common things that you manage with players?
I mean, the soft tissue injuries is probably the most that we see. We have a very hard training coaching staff. They used to work with Boca Juniors out of Argentina, and have a very, very hard mentality on how guys should work. So our training sessions are very, very hard, a lot of load, and then the way that we play is very hard. We run a lot. We close down spaces, very quickly, and a lot of people around the ball. So overuse can be a bit of an issue, and that's the stuff that we try to mitigate with the injury tracking and suggestions to the coaching staff. But we do see quite a bit of soft tissue injuries. Obviously you got your hamstring injuries, groin, lower abdominal injuries, that are usually more on the chronic side. Mm-hmm. But that's typically what we see. Been pretty lucky not to have too many non-contact, ACL injuries or non-contact like ligamentous injuries. Yeah. We did have one this year, early on in the season, which is tough. We're working through right now, but mostly it's the soft tissue stuff that can get into those kind of vicious cycles when, like we've talked about, there's a lot on the line. There's every game is very important. All those points that we obtain early on in the year are going to be very important at the end of the year when we're trying to get a playoff spot or position in the top 8. So obviously, like, reoccurring injuries are tough to deal with, and that's like the black stain is when if we get a reoccurring injury or someone that has a setback, like that's the stuff we really kick ourselves, because we understand the processes of tissue healing and all that, and the progressions that we need to do, but some things are out of our control as well, whether that be a change in practice plans, or some acute episode that happens in a match, or those are the things that you can't really foresee, but we have to get better as a whole. And I'm talking at this point, I think as therapists in general, we have to, do a really thorough job with all the tracking that we do, and ensuring that when we return a player back, they're ready to go back and withstand the loads that are going to be demanded of them from day one till the end of season. So yeah, it's mostly the soft tissue stuff that we're concerned with, really concerned with.
And they, like you said, they can easily turn into vicious cycles. I'm curious because every time that I talk to someone when it comes to managing athletes at the professional level, pro sports teams, the amount of resources that they have compared to even college, high school, or just your weekend warrior. A lot less resources to work with compared to the pros. But with that being said, we still see injuries at the professional level. Since you've been in the league, and with you guys doing baseline testing, doing testing during the off season and the preseason, would you say that there's definitely trends that you see with the players that do experience injuries, whether it's soft tissue or the non-contact stuff is tough, right? There's just an inherent risk to playing sports, especially a sport like soccer. But would you say that there's definitely trends that you guys see that maybe you saw last year that, hey, we need to do a better job with, whether it's the baseline testing that we're doing, or we need to re-examine the training load working up to the season? I'm just curious to hear anything that you're willing to share.
Yeah, I mean, one thing I can go back and say with the topic of resources, I'll let you know that when I was in one of my roommates, his name is Miguel Motomongo. He was a strength coach when I was at the Rapids. I was the assistant athletic trainer for 1 year, and then the next year I was the head for at least like half of the season. We had two guys and very little money, and we fared pretty well with it because of the amount of communication that we had together and the methodology that we kind of went through. He really handled the sports science and the strength of the squad very well. He subsequently went to LAFC and now is my roommate. He's not with LAFC anymore. He's working on his own business. Be a good person for you to chat to as well, by the
I was
way.
gonna say, that's got to be an interesting house.
Yeah, I mean, we played LAFC games when we were living together.
Crazy.
So that was it was kind of looking at ourselves in the morning, going, "All right, I'll see you at war."
See you on the other side of the field.
Yeah,
Crazy.
see you at battle, my friend. But we didn't have a lot of resources there.
Yeah.
Now jump forward, we come to LA Galaxy, who has the highest, like basically the highest budget in the league, compared to Colorado, who has either the lowest or second lowest budget in the league. So yes, there is lack of resources in a lot of these places, like you were saying, high schools and colleges. But if you have a good system in place, then that doesn't matter as much. I think it matters more when you don't have an idea of how you want to do things, how you want to test during the preseason, how you want to retest, what kind of measures you want to really train, what your objectives are and your methodology is. When that's not in line, then I think that's when you suffer some of these issues. When you do have those things a little bit more in line, then the resources become a lot less important, in my opinion. But in terms of Galaxy, yes, we do have quite a bit of resources. We have some money to play with. So some of the things that we really harp on during the preseason testing is doing so we do a lot of muscle testing, not manual muscle testing, but we do muscle testing on the Kanga Tech, which I'm not sure, I didn't know about this before I got to LA Galaxy, but this company is from Australia. It's a, I don't want to compare it to Nordboard because they're two separate things, but it's essentially uses gauges to measure muscle strength, and you can also use it to train athletes at sub-maximal levels. This unit has two poles that have it has a center computer, and you use all the sensors around the center computer to basically test whatever you want. You can test dorsiflexion, you can test not dorsiflexion, sorry, calf strength. You can test like hip flexor strength, groin, adductors in general, abductors in general. So we use those numbers to, along with the rest of our battery, to pick apart our players that have come in off of the back end of off season, and see if they have deficiencies that we can work on to try to mitigate those soft tissue injuries, because we see them every day. this is a lot more beneficial than I would say, a high school team that might train a couple of days a week, a college team that might be in the off season and only seeing their athletic trainer or their coaching staff once a week or something like that. So I think that's where we get the best bang for buck, is with that testing. So other things we do. So yeah, I mentioned the King Attack we do with our strength testing. We also use a Nord board. We use the OptiJump to measure vertical and counter movements and the like. We do wide balance, and then we use another testing site to do some motion or video analysis and force plate testing. So we use the battery of all of these assessments, as well as goniometry assessments, to put a profile together for each individual player, and then give each individual player injury prevention exercises, as well as strength exercises with the sports science and performance group, to try to mitigate those non-contact injuries and those overuse injuries. There is something to say, non-contact injuries, sometimes you can't do much about it if a guy catches a hole in the grass or something like that, but in general, we can do something about that by first and foremost trying to combat their deficiencies, but also with the GPS and injury and tracking, we can see their loads, and we can see when someone's like basically redlining, and if they're redlining close to a game, that's a pretty easy way to indicate that an athlete is either not going to perform as well as they probably will likely perform on a fresher day, or are going to sustain or can sustain a soft tissue or non-contact injury. So that's, I think, for injury prevention and tracking, I think the GPS and the work that the sports science group does is extremely vital to mitigating those risks and actually providing the coaching staff a good picture on how someone can perform outside of soccer metrics or soccer talk. We're not saying this person's going to be able to give you X amount of crosses in a game, but we can say, well, this person is only going to be able to run up and down the field for this much time before they basically empty their fuel tank, and you're going to have to sub them.
Yeah.
So I think that's all encompassing. That's the way that we go about things, is taking those baseline measurements, tracking them over time, tracking them after games, using them as recovery measures as well to see if people are recovered, and then as a presentation or the like for the coaching staff to let them know how their players are doing. And if we need to, maybe rest a player 2 days before a game because on Wednesday they had a very tough session and they hadn't recovered as well. So yeah, those are the kind of things that we do on the front end, and then during every week prior to a game.
I love how you summarized all of that. That was really good, because we started talking about some of the resources, ultimately talked about the methodology, but then you sort of brought everything back together and showed how, yes, they feed into one another, and the resources are important. They're going to help you with making informed decisions, but ultimately, whether you have the resources or not, like the methodology, there has to be a method to the madness. And if you don't have a good systematic approach with what you're doing and how you're handling training, right, you could either you're redlining too much and you're doing too much functional overreaching, or are these guys not doing anything, right? Or so I love how you summarized all that stuff, and I thought that was awesome. Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah, I mean, we didn't even touch on, there's so many aspects to this. We didn't even touch on really recovery measures, the nutritional aspect that our dietitian, all the work that she puts in, getting outside of really our environment, what the video guys are telling them, what they're doing at home. So it's ultimately a huge continuum. You can't segment. You can compartmentalize a few things, but you can't do that on a whole and have success as a team. Because if you start doing that, things are going to fall by the wayside. Players are not going to be ready either tactically, or they're not going to be ready physically, or they're just not going to have the fuel because they, our nutrition side didn't cover what we needed to do on Wednesday when we had our biggest training day. So it really is a huge continuum that has to be in line for a team to have success, because we are a long season. It's from January to, if you make it to the big game, it's like mid-November to end of November. That's a pretty long season, and it's a demanding sport. So
very demanding.
You have to have leeway in how you do things, but that leeway has to be guided by a methodology. So yeah, that's and that's one of the things that we're also working on right now during this downtime. Is, as a staff, we're meeting on a consistent basis and trying to have everyone learn a thing or two from each other. I am pretty well versed with the BFR, thanks to you and the Prehab guys as well. I'm gonna give you guys a little bit of credit on that one.
Thanks, man.
You guys gave us the first, gave your boy the first certification. but if I'm pretty well versed in the BFR, and a couple of our therapists, haven't used it yet, I can put together some sort of a small presentation for them during this time, and I can teach them how to either use it or why we're using it. But during that same time, tell our, talk with Brooke, our dietitian, and say, well, during these times that we're utilizing the BFR, we need to really make sure that amino acids and protein intake are mimicking what we're doing, because if not, we're not going to get the best results from this.
Yeah.
Likewise, we need to also have our recovery measures after that session be the best possible. Hydration is important. So all that is, we're trying to put together those kind of presentations right now, so we can all just learn a little bit from each individual department that makes up the whole sports medicine and performance department at the Galaxy. So yeah, it's just a huge, it's so difficult to explain in just a few words. I think that's why I'm rambling, but it's a big machine, and like you said, like it's the resources are one thing, but you have to have a reason and a why as to how you're doing things. So that's where we're trying to cement right now.
Yeah, the sum is greater than its parts, and in order to optimize everything that it takes to work towards that end goal, it takes a team effort, not just the players, but every department that you mentioned. And that's awesome. I'm sure that we could talk hours about that stuff. But Cesar, this has been packed with so much information. Thank you. I know any soccer enthusiast, any soccer fan is going to absolutely eat this podcast up. I'd like to finish with at least one question, and then open up the stage for anything else that you want to share. But we ask this to everyone. What does Prehab mean to you? And what would you give to any soccer enthusiast in terms of Prehab?
Ooh, this is a good one. Okay. So to me, Prehab means overall, it means one thing, but with respects to you guys, it means two. It actually means, for me, talking with you guys and knowing you and the other boys, it's giving out information to the masses to help better people without really asking for much, because you guys don't ask for anything, but you guys are so willing to go out and teach people how to move and how to move correctly and how to fix themselves, and what deficiencies might they work on to reach their goals as an individual. So I think you and your brand have really pushed that message forward. And when I to be fair, when I think of Prehab, a lot of times your guys' name comes up. In my setting, Prehab would be that talk of getting baselines done or taking some sort of screening, and it doesn't have to be anything super objective. It can be just looking at someone move, realizing why they move that way, and then figuring out a way that they can do it better and more efficiently with the least amount of exercises or interventions. So when I think of prehab and I look at developing prehab protocols or situations, typically I make that interchangeably with injury prevention. But that's what I kind of look at a person that comes in and says, I want to do this better, I want to do that better, or I do have an ache here and there. Look at their movements and then formulate some sort of plan to make sure that movement doesn't cause an injury that's going to limit them from doing activities of daily living or sport. So that's to me in a short, that's what that means to me. And I think we incorporate it much more than we even think about. It's really a everyday thing with us. So yeah, that's my little piece on that. Hope that's on par with some of the things that others have said.
It's great. I love it. And if there's anything else I want to add in, I'll edit it. I'm just kidding. All right, man. Thank you so much. Again, I'm so glad that we made this happen, and stay healthy, stay safe, and I'm rooting for you guys this year. I hope that you do well.
Yeah, I mean, you'll be at one of the first games that we actually let fans in. So
nice.
We'll get you out there, and then maybe we can reconvene and do another one of these once everything's back in the flow and we've lived through this crazy time, man.
Yeah. Well, I love it, man. Thank you.
Cool, brother. All right, man. Take it easy.
See you.
And thank you for the opportunity.
Of course. Yeah. Thanks for sticking around and listening to Cesar and I chatting about all things soccer. I hope you learned a lot. I did. I just love picking people's brains when it comes to soccer, and I'm super jealous of what Cesar does. I totally love what I do, and I wouldn't want it to be any other way. But if I was not doing what we're doing with this business, I would 125% be pursuing a job that Cesar has. Soccer just holds a close place to my heart. I just absolutely love working with soccer players. That is all that I would want to see if I could have it my way. So thanks for sticking around. I know that there were some issues with the audio, but I hope it didn't deter from your experience. Definitely reach out to Cesar. His contact info is in the show notes. He's such an easygoing, cool guy. Like he mentioned in the podcast, he came to one of our BFR courses, and he's just such a cool guy, easy to talk to, and he'd be happy to answer any of your questions that you have. If you enjoyed this podcast, please rate, review, and subscribe to our podcast. It would absolutely mean the world to us. Please comment. Tell us what you want to hear about. What do you want to listen to? Who do you want us to interview? What do you want us three to talk about? I think the three of us we're starting to realize that the Prehab audio experience needs to feature more of the Prehab guys. So that's why we're experimenting with some of these longer intros and outros. Let us know what you think. Do you love it? Do you hate it? We are trying to tailor this podcast experience to what our viewers want. So we're constantly experimenting, but ultimately it's about improving your experience. So let us know. Until next time, stay healthy, stay safe, and until then, take it easy.